Football is back. What's up, everybody? Today we are going to look ahead at the AFC South, but we have the Hall of Fame game today. The Detroit Lions play against the LA Chargers. So there is some football. No starters are really playing, but the rookies are going to play. So that'll be fun to check them out. And ultimately, it's just good to see some football back on TV. So I can't wait for that. Maybe we'll talk about that if there's any storylines that come out of that game. But ultimately, we just expect to see some guys in pads running around, throwing the pigskin and seeing football on TV again. But before that game, we are going to look ahead to the AFC South and break down this division and see how we think it will play out. All right, so last year, this is what it looked like. Last year, the Houston Texans finished up on top at 10-7. The Colts were a respectful 8-9. The Jacksonville Jaguars were 4-13. And the Tennessee Titans were dead last in the division at 3-14. And ultimately, that's why they ended up getting the number one pick, which was Cam Ward. So we will get to that. But first and foremost, let's look at the Houston Texans, who finished up first last year in the division. So the thing with the Texans is I think they have a good foundation. C.J. Stroud had a pretty great rookie year, obviously. Second year, not great. But they made the playoffs. They even won a playoff game, which was surprising. They beat the Chargers. But then, they lost to the Chiefs, and that was kind of expected. The biggest loss ultimately for them in the offseason is they traded away Laramie Tunsil, their left tackle, to protect C.J. Stroud, who that O-line wasn't great. But ultimately, I guess there was a lot of drama within the O-line room, which is why they ended up trading him. I think it also has to do with the fact that he was a little bit older and the contract extension was looming. So out goes Laramie Tunsil. Essentially, they bring in Cam Robinson, who started off with the Jaguars last year, got traded to the Vikings when they lost their left tackle, Christian Darrisaw. And he did an okay job there as a starter in Minnesota. But then ultimately this summer, he signs with the Texans. So he's most likely the replacement for Laramie Tunsil. Tunsil is obviously a better player, more established, an all-pro tackle. He got traded to Washington. So now it's going to be Cam Robinson there. They also got Ed Ingram from the Vikings. And as a Viking fan, I'll tell you, he struggled. He's not great, but he is a depth piece. So you have that there. An addition that I really like for them is they added Nick Chubb. So that's a good running back to have as a 1-2 punch kind of with Joe Mixon. And now with Nick Chubb, you don't really depend on him fully to be your lead guy, which is great considering he's dealt with a lot of injuries. But he was kind of a sneaky signing this offseason that if he is healthy again, I mean, Nick Chubb is, he's a workhorse. He's a beast. So that backfield could be great. They added Christian Kirk as well, who was with the Jaguars, and Sheldon Rankins, a defensive tackle. So they made some good moves. And also they got C.J. Gardner-Johnson from the Super Bowl champion Eagles as some defensive back help. So the Texans seem like a really solid team. I love their defense. Their defense should be great. Ultimately, I don't know why. For some reason, I keep feeling like they've underachieved, and maybe this is the year that they overachieve. We will see, but I'm not sure if it's from the coaching or what it is, but there's something about them. I always expect them to be better than they end up being. But maybe this year is that, with obviously the changes that they've made. So that's to recap the Texans offseason. Let's look ahead to the Colts. So the Colts, obviously with a new coach, Shane Steichen last year. And, the team wasn't bad. The problem with them is just that last year was either Anthony Richardson or it was Joe Flacco. And they were going back and forth between the two. Richardson, got benched, then Flacco comes in, and there's injuries and all this, and they just were going back and forth, but they still managed to have an 8-9 record. And honestly, they were kind of battling it out for a playoff spot there until the end. This offseason, they signed Daniel Jones, who last year, if you remember, was released by the Giants, went over to Minnesota, was kind of a third QB just sitting there. And many expected him to re-sign with Minnesota, but instead he goes to the Colts because he sees an opportunity to possibly be a starter. But reports from camp seem to be that Anthony Richardson is actually looking pretty good. Like, he's made some improvements. He had a shoulder injury that he was dealing with. Maybe that's a lot better. So now you have, hopefully a more solidified quarterback, if that makes sense. Whether it's Daniel Jones or whether it's Anthony Richardson, you hope whoever it is at least is their lasting QB and can improve. Obviously, I think the franchise would rather be Anthony Richardson since they invested so much by picking him high in the draft. But if Daniel Jones beats him out in camp, then at least you have an established starter. So I feel better about their quarterback situation going into this season. They also shored up the defense. They signed Cam Bynum, a safety, Shadarius Ward, a corner who was on the 49ers and a pretty solid cornerback. And they drafted Tyler Warren to help out the offense, who was projected to be the top tight end in the draft. Colts and Loveland got picked a few picks before him, and the Colts felt like it was incredible that they were able to still get Tyler Warren as a second tight end drafted in that draft class. He was a Penn State tight end, and honestly, I was surprised that he was a second tight end pick, but he seems to be pretty much a hybrid and a great receiving tight end. And now they lose some offensive linemen. Ryan Kelly and Will Fries essentially get signed off by the Vikings, so they go to Minnesota. But the Colts trusted their younger guys and their depth with the O-line room, so those guys are anticipated to move up and shore up the offensive line. So obviously that's kind of a question mark, but when it's homegrown like that, a lot of times I think they must have a good grasp of what's going on and who these players are, and maybe it's just opportunity. Plus, you can get a little bit cheaper. And last but not least, they signed Trey Herndon. So the Colts, I think, could be better this year. I mean, really, it comes up to that quarterback stability. But at the same time, I do like how their head coach has been leading the pack there, and we'll see how they do. Move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who drafted Travis Hunter, and that's the big news for them. Obviously, is he going to play corner, wide receiver? Is he going to do both? I think he's going to be a cornerback, and they'll have a package for him specifically to be in as a wide receiver 3 at times. Obviously, he can move to the outside, but I think ultimately they're going to want him as a cornerback. And again, he's a playmaker, so you throw him in on offense on third downs or whatever, and he's still going to be a piece there. I think he's a great player. I think he's going to be awesome. But I do think that, the Jags, Trevor Lawrence is the biggest question. Is he legit? Is he not legit? And ultimately, so they get a new head coach this offseason, and this is all you need to hear from him.
Duval.
One more time.
Duval.
Yikes. I don't know if I can trust this guy. I'll give him a pass. Liam Cohen is their new head coach. They have a new regime, new GM, new head coach. The GM is like the youngest GM in the league. So, it is what it is. They've made some draft trades that people were kind of surprised about, but ultimately we got to give them a shot. I'm not very confident just because I haven't seen it with Trevor Lawrence. And this head coach, again, we'll see. I don't want to judge him off of the 4-second clip, but man, it'd be hard to be listening to this guy if this is how he leads. But we'll see. Again, we'll give that a pass. They signed Jordan Lewis, so they get some secondary help. Eric Murray, Jordan Lewis was with the Cowboys. Eric Murray was with the Texans, so they get some secondary help. They did lose Ronald Darby, who was a cornerback, so that kind of stinks for them. And Christian Kirk, obviously they lost, who went over to Houston, a division rival. And they added De'Ami Brown, who, if you all remember, wasn't much of a player for most of the season, but in the playoffs kind of came through for Washington. He had a huge game in the playoffs for them and kind of made a name for himself. He signed a $10 million one-year deal with the Jags. It's a kind of prove-it deal, I guess. If he can prove that he's good, then he'll get probably a pretty big contract next offseason. So we'll see. But the Jags, I don't know. I mean, they were 4-13 last year, and they could be a little better, but a new regime and all that. Trevor Lawrence not going to have to learn a new offense. They don't have big playmakers. We'll see how that goes. And last but maybe not least, is the Tennessee Titans. Again, Cam Ward comes in. He's the most, I would say, overlooked number 1 pick because there were so many other, you could say, I guess, big names here. But the real thing with them is they were 3-14 last year. They had Will Levis. If you've watched Will Levis play, if you watched him play last year, he threw pick sixes like they were Christmas gifts to the defense and ultimately cost the Titans like 2 games because of some stupid throws. So now he's hurt, which is a blessing in disguise, I guess you could say. I don't know. I mean, he wasn't going to start anyway. You drafted Cam Ward, so Cam Ward comes in, and I think he's going to be a stud. I think Cam Ward's going to be great. And just based off having a good quarterback or a solid rookie QB, I think that gets you a few wins. So I don't see them finishing last anymore. I think they're going to be improved. They signed the left tackle, Dan Moore. They signed the guard in Kevin Zeitler. So ultimately, they shore up the offensive line to protect the young quarterback. They, added Van Jefferson. They don't really have great wide receiver weapons. They don't really have too many weapons, ultimately. They just cut Treylon Burks, who got hurt. But, they don't have the weapons, but they do have at least a quarterback that you would think is competent. I mean, we'll see again, but the quarterback play was so bad last year that I feel like it can't possibly get worse. So you just expect them to improve from within, and we'll see how that plays out. Cody Barton, the linebacker they brought in from Denver, who's pretty solid. And I don't know. I just don't see them being as bad as last year. Last year, honestly, they should have finished 5-12. But two of those games, like I said, I specifically remember the Bears game. And that was just one of the dumbest plays I've ever seen by Will Levis. I'm gonna try to find this clip to play it, but this was just a bonehead play by Will Levis. And I mean, when you see it, you're gonna completely agree with me and being like, this is how they lost games. They had, like, this game, for example, against the Bears. They had this game in the bag.
On 3rd down and 6. Here they come. Gordon's coming. Levis gets wrapped up. Flings it ahead. It's picked off. Tyreek Stevenson will give the Bears the lead on another defensive play.
Another defensive play, because he had already given them some turnovers early in the game. I mean,
they gave DeMarcus Walker a chance on the edge.
3rd and 6.
And Levis just falls right into his lap. Right there, you cannot make a bad play worse. And here they go, going for 2.
Yeah, I mean, just stupid, man.
Look at the Bears.
You cannot do this.
Offense ready to go. But that's a cardinal sin right there.
That wasn't the only play like that he made all season long. So, again, Levis was horrible. So I can't see them being worse. So, ultimately, this is possibly the worst division in football. It's not, because I think the NFC South will be worse, but it is one of the toughest to predict because of how not great these teams are. And honestly, I'm battling at the top between who I think will finish 1st and 2nd in this division. And I'm going to go out on a limb. You know what? I feel like I've been going chalk most of these predictions. So today, going out on a limb, and I'm going to say the Indianapolis Colts are going to win the AFC South. I'm going to give the Colts an 11-6 record. I think they'll improve on what they did last year. I think if Richardson is the starter, he'll play better. He already was a starter for pretty much half the season last year, and they still went 8-9 ultimately as a team. So if he's better, I think the record will be a little better. And if it's not him and it's Daniel Jones, I think he's an established quarterback. They won't ask him to do too much. They re-signed Michael Pittman. They have some weapons. So, Jonathan Taylor, can't forget about him. And ultimately, I like the direction in which the Colts are headed. They shored up their secondary and some defense there. So I like the Colts. I'm going to go the Colts finish 11-6. A close second will be the Houston Texans. I'm going to give them, I would say they'd finish 11-6 as well and lose the tiebreaker, but just to simplify, let's say they go 10-7 again. I think they'll be second. And I'm going to flip the two teams that finished 3rd and 4th last year. I think the Titans will finish ahead of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think the Titans improved by 3 or 4 wins this year. So I could see them going 7-10. That's my Titans prediction. Might be a little bit high. I understand that, but either 16-11 or 7-10. Let's go with 7-10. And the Jags, I think, are going to go 6-11. I don't see it. I just will see. They have to prove me wrong. I don't think they have a huge home field advantage either. And again, Travis Hunter is great. He's a playmaker, but those types of players are great to have and they can improve the team, but they don't usually end up, making a 2 to 3 win difference. It's usually the quarterback, and they have the same quarterback as they had last year. And ultimately, I just don't see that they added any big pieces to help that out. And I don't know about this coach, and we'll have to just see. So that's my prediction. Colts 11-6, Texans 10-7, Titans 7-10, Jags 6-11. I'll catch y'all on the flip side.